Some individuals are naturally endowed with a rare clarity. They don't just observe the world. They perceive its hidden fractures, the subtle tremors behind polite smiles, the exhaustion beneath laughter, and the underlying tension in every conversation. When they enter a room, they detect the dissonance that others have learned to overlook. Their insight focuses not on what is plainly visible, but on what slips through the pauses in speech and the unease beneath the surface. Gradually, they also become aware of the same illusions within themselves. The quiet hypocrisy, the delicate facades, and the fear of being genuinely seen. To see clearly is to step into risky territory. Once you begin noticing what others choose to ignore, you approach the threshold of awakening. It's the moment when the veil lifts, revealing how many people prefer the comfort of ignorance. Most drift through life with open eyes but remain asleep, caught in repetition and noise. Yet once consciousness sparks, it cannot be dimmed. You cannot unsee the masks, the performances, or the endless roles people play. Attempt to return to sleep or forget the intensity of awareness fail. By then, the fire has already started. This is a solitude of the aware. To awaken in a world that prizes distraction is to live like an exile. The more you perceive, the fewer companions you find, not from arrogance, but because vision creates distance. As Jung observed, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. He also understood that awakening is not triumph. It is trial. The cost of consciousness is separation. When your eyes open to truth, you no longer fit the dream. Initially, this heightened sensitivity feels like a gift. You notice what others overlook. The flicker of anxiety in a voice, the hesitation behind a smile, the subtle falsehoods that color conversation. You read the hidden meaning behind every gesture. Over time, however, this gift grows burdensome. To see too much is to feel too much, and feel deeply in a world that avoids depth is to endure quiet suffering. Insight reveals the mechanics of human contradiction. The lies we tell to belong, the fears that shape our kindness, the despair masked as certainty. A unique ache accompanies understanding. It is not despair itself, but the weight of seeing the world stripped of its illusions. You begin to detect intention in every word. Fatigue lingers behind every celebration, and fear hides beneath every display of strength. The sparkle of parties starts to seem dim, and conversations lose their flow. The world that once felt abundant begins to appear shallow. Many interpret this sensitivity as weakness, but it is quite the opposite. It is lucidity, a mind awakened, no longer able to retreat into illusion. As Alan Watts observed, consciousness is like a lamp. When it lights the world, it also reveals its own shadow. The brighter the light, the sharper the contrast. Awakening means seeing both beauty and decay, truth and terror. Awareness offers no flattery. It exposes. And that exposure inevitably includes yourself. You begin to notice your own deceptions, the ways you participated in the same social theater, the masks you've worn, the fears that kept you performing. These are all part of the self Jung called the shadow. The shadow is not evil. It is the aspect of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. Facing it demands courage. Once you glimpse the hidden chambers of your psyche, there is no return to innocence. Neuroscience describes similar awakenings, moments when the brain's predictive model fails, when expectations collapse under reality. The mind resists, favoring coherence, even if it is false, over a truth that burns. Yet these ruptures are also opportunities. They invite reorganization and transformation. Consciousness grows through discomfort. What mystics call revelation, scientists might describe as neural repatterning, the rewiring of perception when reality pierces the veil. As a result, you withdraw, not out of dislike for the world, but from overstimulation, from a noise that drowns the whispers of the soul. Solitude becomes a sanctuary. You seek stillness, not from disdain for humanity, but because you need space to breathe. In quiet, the psyche restores balance. The distractions of others' performances fade, and you begin to hear the rhythm of your own becoming. To see too much is to feel the pulse of everything around you. You sense the collective fatigue in a crowd, the subtle grief of civilization, and the loneliness hidden behind confidence. It's like standing at the center of a masquerade, aware that everyone is dancing on unsteady legs. No longer fooled by costumes, not even your own. This awareness, this intimate connection with truth, sets you apart. In a numb world, sensitivity appears strange. Yet what others call strange is simply alive. Perhaps this is a paradox. The clearer your vision, the deeper your compassion. True insight does not harden, it softens. Seeing the wounds behind people's masks shifts you from judgment to understanding. You realize that every pretense is a defense, every arrogance a plea for safety, and every performance a shield against pain. To see clearly is to love profoundly, not because the world is perfect, but because you recognize its fragility. Clarity may isolate, but also frees. It frees you from a tyranny of pretense, from the exhausting need to belong to illusions. It teaches the sacred practice of solitude, the ability to stand alone without resentment. Jung might have described this as a first step toward individuation, breaking free from collective hypnosis and giving birth to the authentic self. Yet there are moments when the lucid envy the sleepers. Ignorance carries a certain warmth, but exchanging awareness for comfort is a betrayal of the soul. For those awakened, there is no turning back. Eyes that have seen cannot unsee, and hearts that have known cannot unknow. The light may burn, but it also brings clarity. Through that fire, something purer begins to emerge, the faint outline of freedom. So if you carry the strange weight of perception, the uncomfortable clarity, do not resist it. That discomfort is your teacher. Loneliness is initiation. The light that isolates also illuminates the path back, not to others, but to yourself. The price of seeing is high, yet the cost of remaining blind is far greater. Have you noticed how the world resembles a stage? People move through it like actors following an unspoken script. They smile on cue, exchange rehearsed words, and call it connection. How are you? I'm fine. They reply almost automatically, even when their hearts tremble beneath the surface. This is a theater of normality, the quiet performance where everyone pretends to be whole. Strangely, no one needs to explain the rules. We all absorb them instinctively, to hide our pain, to dress up our exhaustion, to appear certain even when we feel lost. Watch closely, and the illusion begins to ripple. The laughter carries a faint strain, slightly forced. Compliments carry the weight of expectation, and conversations often circle endlessly around nothing. We have become so fearful of silence that noise itself has become the new form of intimacy. The constant hum of distraction keeps us from noticing the emptiness beneath. We live in a society that rewards performance and discourages authenticity. Sincerity has been replaced by convenience, and depth traded for display. Those who refuse to participate in the social theater are often labeled strange, cold, or detached. The reality is simpler. They can no longer lie. They cannot feign enthusiasm for hollow rituals or smile through hypocrisy. Their silence is not rejection. It is honesty. Their distance is not pride. It is self-preservation. As Jung observed, loneliness does not arise from being alone, but from being unable to share what feels essential. Perhaps this explains the quiet exhaustion so many carry. The fatigue doesn't stem from work. It comes from pretending, from sustaining a character day after day. For many, social life is a stage where applause replaces intimacy. You must appear successful, cheerful, confident, regardless of what burns beneath. The price of belonging is self-betrayal. You laugh when you want to cry, agree when you disagree, and say, "I'm fine," even as your inner world collapses. Gradually, the mask fuses with your skin. You forget the face beneath it, the person you were before learning the script. As Alan Watts observed, the ego is a role we forget we were playing. The danger is not in the mask itself. Masks serve a purpose, but in our forgetfulness about them. We identify with the character, mistaking costume for essence. We become the diligent worker, the ideal child, the agreeable friend. Yet beneath each role, the true self stirs restless. It begins as a faint unease, a subtle sense of falsity. You begin to feel like an actor in someone else's play. That discomfort is often the first spark of awakening. When someone dares to break the script, speaking honestly in a conversation built on pleasantries, remaining silent in a room that fears stillness, or saying, "I'm not okay," the system resists. The group grows uneasy, as if truth itself were contagious. The spectacle cannot tolerate reality, because reality dissolves the illusion of control. Despite its sophistication, the modern world still trembles before authenticity. It favors filters over faces, slogans over sincerity, and positivity over presence. We hide behind the glow of screens, curating digital masks until even our loneliness appears polished. Yet for those who see through the act, there is no returning to blindness. Seeing the game is a first step toward freedom, but freedom comes with a cost. You lose applause, invitations, and the comfort of sameness. Yet in return, you gain something far rarer: peace. The peace of no longer needing to pretend, the quiet strength of standing as you are, unpolished, unperformed. This is what psychological maturity feels like, when you no longer feel compelled to prove your happiness, success, or normality. Recognizing that normal is simply society's polite word for conformity, the awakened mind stops seeking approval and begins seeking truth. And once truth is tasted, imitation becomes unbearable. Modern neuroscience describes a process similar to this. When the brain's default networks quiet during moments of authenticity, performance gives way to presence. Activity in the prefrontal cortex shifts, self-monitoring relaxes, and raw experience takes over. It's as if the brain itself exhales when you stop acting. The nervous system relaxes. You rediscover what it means to be real. If you feel weary of small talk, tired of forced smiles, or disillusioned by friendships that feel transactional, there is nothing wrong with you. That fatigue is not cynicism. It is clarity. You are simply done performing. You no longer wish to play a character in someone else's story. You long to return to your own pulse, to the original rhythm beneath the noise. And that return often begins with silence. The silence others fear, but you begin to crave. In that silence, the masks finally fall. In silence, you begin to hear your own heartbeat again. Gradually, what once felt like loneliness transforms into something sacred. Solitude, the space where the long-exiled self begins to speak once more. Those who awaken may appear distant, but they are not disconnected. They are listening to a deeper conversation, the dialogue between soul and truth. They no longer seek a stage. They seek presence. They no longer crave applause. They seek meaning. Living without pretense becomes a quiet act of rebellion, a sacred defiance against a collective trance. Yes, this clarity can be isolating, but it also brings wholeness, because nothing is lonelier than being surrounded by people while absent from yourself. The world may label this withdrawal as strange. Jung saw it differently, as a beginning of individuation, the birth of the true individual who no longer mistakes adaptation for authenticity. The curtain falls, the stage lights dim, and what remains is not emptiness, but essence. The person behind the mask breathes freely again, and for the first time in a long while, the breath feels real. Alan Watts once noted that humanity's greatest illusion is a belief in separation, as if a wave could exist apart from the ocean. We spend our lives building boundaries between self and other, inside and outside, light and shadow. Yet the tighter we cling to these separations, the greater our suffering. Loneliness does not arrive as punishment. It is an invitation. It calls us inward to dissolve the false borders of identity. Consciousness itself is continuous, like a vast sea flowing through all of us. Jung called this inward journey individuation. The process of becoming whole involves reconciling everything that was once fragmented. Jung warned that this is not a collective journey. No one can walk it for you. It is a solitary descent into the labyrinth of the psyche, where the path to the self is forged through shadows of fear and forgotten truths. Individuation requires silence, not merely the absence of noise, but the living stillness in which the soul can hear itself once more. At first, solitude feels like exile. The world seems to fade, friends appear distant, and the familiar loses its color. Yet within this quiet unmasking, something ancient begins to stir. Jung compared it to a tree. No tree can reach the sky unless its roots descend into the depths. To grow upward, we must first explore our unconscious, our repressed desires, and our unhealed wounds. Here we encounter the shadow, our hidden counterpart, carrying everything we have denied. Facing it without judgment marks the beginning of freedom, for what we refuse to confront within will repeatedly appear outside. Modern neuroscience echoes this ancient insight. Studies of meditation reveal that when the mind grows still, the default mode network, the circuitry of ego and narrative, quietly recedes. The boundaries between self and world blur. In this state, perception expands, compassion deepens, and the brain, like the psyche, begins to unify. It is as if the biological mirror of individuation briefly illuminates the folds of the cortex, confirming what mystics have long known. You are not separate. You are a pulse of the whole. This is why solitude, properly understood, is not isolation. It is attention. When you learn to sit in silence, thoughts pass like clouds across a vast sky. You begin to understand that you are not the storm, but the space in which it moves. You are not the voice in your head, but the one who listens. From this quiet awareness, compassion arises, not as obligation, but as recognition. You see yourself reflected in all beings, just as light reflects endlessly across the ocean's waves. The descent, however, is not without pain. The ego resists dissolution, much like a caterpillar resists the cocoon. Yet every transformation begins with disintegration. In the darkness, the old identity dissolves, leaving a period of uncertainty. That void, however, is sacred. Jung called it the night sea journey. In myth, it appears as Inanna's descent, the crucifixion, or the wandering in the desert. In neuroscience, it can be understood as the brain restructuring, shedding old neural patterns to make way for new ones, so that new connections may emerge. Different languages, same truth, death before rebirth. Modern life fears this kind of silence because it cannot be marketed, measured, or monetized. Yet the soul requires it. Without solitude, we lose the thread of meaning, drifting through life while mistaking constant stimulation for vitality. In the quiet of being alone, we discover something the world cannot provide, the gentle realization that we are already whole. As what's observed, silence is not the opposite of sound. It is the background that allows sound to exist. Similarly, solitude is not the absence of life. It is the space in which life becomes visible. It is the very foundation of life itself. When you settle into this deeper solitude, you stop seeking approval. You no longer pursue belonging at the expense of authenticity. You realize that being alone does not mean being empty. It means being whole. The world may label you distant, but distance grants perspective. From this higher vantage, life's patterns emerge. The interweaving of light and dark, chaos and order, love and loss, all part of the same eternal dance. Here is where Watts and Jung converge. One spoke of enlightenment, the other of individuation, yet both point to the same truth. The self and the whole are not separate. Awakening is simply remembering. The light you seek has always been within. To see too much, to feel too deeply, is not a curse but a calling. It is the psyche's invitation to consciousness. Awakening is indeed painful. It strips away illusion, burns through pretense, and separates you from the comfort of conformity. Yet offers something infinitely greater, truth, the clarity to see yourself without disguise, to embrace both shadow and light, and stand in solitude without fear. Whoever has learned to be alone has discovered the essence of freedom. The lucid may walk apart, but they are never truly separate. They are mirrors of the collective soul, carrying its awareness, its ache, and its potential for transformation. To see clearly is to serve quietly, existing as a reminder that life without masks is possible. The inward journey, though solitary, becomes a gift to the world. Each awakened soul makes it slightly harder for the rest to remain asleep. Perhaps this is the ultimate meaning of clarity. Not to perceive more than others, but to finally see yourself, without noise, without disguise, in silence. A silence that is not empty, but alive. A silence where the self encounters the infinite,